Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today I wanted to talk about something that I've been wanting to record for a really long time to kind of take a little bit of a deep dive in it, and that is career and chronic illness. So I want to talk about my personal experience of what has happened with my career, how my chronic illness has shaped, what I studied in college to what I've done now, and even what chronic illness has sort of taken away from me from a career standpoint. This is something again that I've been wanting to share for quite a while, but I feel like it's deserved its own kind of longer form video because it's something that affects a lot of patients, and it's something that affected me personally, and I think it's important to talk about. So a lot of people know this about me is that when I started college, I started when I'm majoring in biology. I wanted to go to medical school at the time. That's kind of what I thought people did if they wanted to kind of get into science and study biology is that they wanted to go to medical school, and so that's what I started at. But what happened to me that very first semester of college changed everything. Honestly, did it change what I was studying? No, but eventually it changed kind of the path that I was on. So my very first semester of college, about 2 months in, like October, I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease. So I was very sick at the time. It was 2009, just started college. And I'd been, prior to starting college, I'd already been undergoing a lot of the testing and everything related to IBD. And so I had all of that done and got the diagnosis. I actually remember it to this day. I was at school, college, on campus, walking in between classes. I got a call and they said, "Hey, look, we've got some of your stuff back. We've got a diagnosis, and it's Crohn's disease. And if you don't know what Crohn's disease is, it's a immune-mediated disease of the gastrointestinal tract. It can affect from the mouth all the way down to the anus. It typically is in the small bowel, but it can affect anywhere: the throat, the stomach, the small bowel, the large bowel, and it can be a very serious and debilitating disease for a lot of people. This affected me in a way where I was put in the hospital almost immediately after being diagnosed. I think a few weeks after I got my diagnosis, I was already very sick and on a path of, uh, I guess my disease flaring and coming to a head. But a few weeks after diagnosis, still was very sick. We couldn't get me under control. So I got put in the hospital, and that was my very first semester of college. I did not have to take really time off. I was in the hospital about a week and a half and got all the right medications in me. We got me under control, stable, and I was able to go back to school and finish out the semester. I did get a grade that I didn't want to get, but I didn't have to take any time off school, and I kept going. Throughout my undergraduate years, studying biology, that never changed, but I did go through a lot in terms of my disease. So I was hospitalized a lot of time, a bunch of times. I've probably been hospitalized about 8 to 10 times related to the Crohn's disease at this point. But one of the bigger things that kind of happened where I did have to take time off school and having to take a whole year off of school was I had my hips replaced. And when I was 18, which was about a year after I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease, I was in the hospital for a flare, and the CT scan caught part of my hips, and they told me that I had what is called avascular necrosis. So basically, my hip bones were dying, and then at age 20, about 2 years later, I had to undergo hip replacements because my hip joints were dying, the bone was failing, and that's kind of the end stage of that. And at the time, we did not know that I had something else going on with my bones, and but the surgeries were major. I had 3 hip surgeries that year and it required me to take a whole year off of school. And I was going into my junior year, I believe. And so that 2012 into 2013, I took that whole year off to have my hips replaced and recover. And it's a bit of a long recovery, especially the first go around with the hip replacements. It's intense and it requires months of therapy and it's just a lot. So I did that, and after I took the year off, I went back, continued my studies, and graduated with a degree in biology. But after I went back, taking the year off. I decided to not pursue medical school. I wanted to go get a PhD. I wanted to work in science. I wanted to do the bench science, the lab work, the that like what they call basic science. I wanted to learn as much as I could about biology and contribute to science and medicine in that way rather than medical school. And so it didn't really change my studies because I had to take the same courses. But after I graduated with my bachelor's degree in biology, I made a decision to get a master's. And what I wanted to do was, with all the health stuff that I had, all the hospitalizations, the surgeries, a couple of my grades were not necessarily where I wanted to be. And I made the decision a little late in my undergrad, where when I came back after that junior year, I really got into research at school and into a lab with some of my teachers and made the decision to change. And so I wanted one to make sure that that's what I wanted to do. And I felt like getting a master's in biology research would for sure cement that for me. And then also to make sure that I could, with my health and everything, continue to go down a path of, because PhD is very intense and I want to make sure that I can do it and complete it and all of that. So I decided to get a master's. And so I started my master's degree. And what happened was, in the end of my first year of my master's degree, I dislocated one of my hip replacements. I was getting out of the bed. I turned, shifted, my hip shifted out. And a couple weeks after that, long story short, I've talked about this before, is I had to have my hips replaced again. So I had to have surgery to have the implants, the prosthetics that were in there taken out, and then put back in with some new ones to stabilize my leg, to lengthen my leg, and get me back to a point to where I could walk. I lost the ability to really get around as well because of the failing hip replacement. So, and that was a big deal. That was for me I guess a turning point and a realization that something was going on with me that wasn't just related to Crohn's disease. And if there's ever a point in my chronic illness journey that I look to that was really defining, it was that. It was after not quite 4 years of having hip replacements, I had to have them again because they failed because my bones were very weak and they couldn't hold those original replacements in. And so, what I was able to do though is it was closer to the end of my first year of my master's degree. So, I was able to finish a couple classes online. I had the surgery. I had to have the surgery during that time. So, I was able to finish a couple of courses online. I did have to drop a class, but it didn't really affect me as much. And then had the surgery, took a couple months, came back and for sort of the summer session, and then or part of a summer session, and then the last month in July of that year, I had my other hip done because they both had to be redone. I had my other hip done. It gave me about 5 to 6 weeks, kind of get have surgery and get back before the fall semester started. To this day, I have no clue how I managed to do that to kind of get to a point to where I was well enough to go back to be able to walk. And I just really didn't want to. I already took a year off school in undergrad. I didn't want to take any more time off. So the way that we were able to do it is kind of push through it, and I made it. And so I was able to finish my master's degree on time, and took 2 years. And I at that point, I'd gone through so much with my health that I decided to take some time off. I didn't apply to a PhD program immediately. And a couple months after I finished, I was diagnosed with hypophosphatasia, which is an ultra rare genetic metabolic bone disease. And the reason that my hip replacement failed, and the reason I had very weak bones, and all this other stuff that didn't make sense, because Crohn's disease couldn't have done the damage that it did, and some of the medication that I was on couldn't have done the damage that it did. I knew that there was something wrong. And when I talk about the turning point, the defining moment in my chronic illness journey, having those hips replaced during my master's degree was it. And I personally knew something was wrong. I started digging into my medical record and not to rehash the story I've told a lot, but I came up with a diagnosis, ended up being referred to a geneticist. Turns out I was right, and I was diagnosed with this disease, this very rare, very serious genetic bone disease. And so, because all of that was going on, I decided to take the time off and not pursue a PhD at the time. My goal was to go back to school, to go eventually do it after I kind of took the time to wrap my head around everything, get what I could done in terms of my chronic illness, this new disease, and the truth of the matter is, I never was able to go back and get my PhD. Did I apply for a PhD program? Yes. Did I get in? Yes. Did I turn it down? Yes. I wanted to go back, so I applied and I got in, and then a lot of things happened, and it just didn't make sense for me to go back. My wife and I, during the time that I took off, we had a baby, we had a son, and those are the things that sort of change how you want to go about your career sometimes, for me at least. So I didn't want to go back and spend 5 or 6 years maybe of having to study full time, miss out on his stuff, and also my health got so bad during those years to where, I mean, ever since I've had 25 surgeries related to my rare disease. A lot, I think 10 of those have been since my diagnosis, since 2017. And I have to go out of state for care. So I have to go to Nashville, Tennessee, to Vanderbilt, because my disease is so rare. That's the closest specialist to be able to treat it. So twice a year, sometimes a little more than that, I have to go out of state. So there were so many things that just didn't really line up with me being able to go back to school. And that was something I had to come to terms with. It was kind of a grief part of something that I worked for and towards so hard, and not to be able to do it after getting into the program that I wanted to get into was heartbreaking. It was. It made me sad, and it took me, honestly, probably up until more recently to completely come to terms with that. And I know for a long time that I wasn't going to be able to go back and get my PhD and all of that. And but it just takes a while to kind of come to terms with all of that and get to a point to where you're okay with it. And there are things that have happened that have made me realize that, I believe that I am where I'm supposed to be, and that I've been able to have the family that I want, which is more important to me than anything in this world, and to have a career that I like, and to be able to kind of contribute to that, and then do the patient advocacy work that I do videos like this, to talk about my story, to share my story. And so it sucked, and it made me very sad, and was just really hard to come to terms with. But I will say that I've come to terms with it. And honestly, I felt embarrassed for a long time. That's just the truth of it. Because for a long time, I was going for a PhD and did a master's and did all this stuff. And so many people expected me to go get a PhD and to continue down that path. And I was kind of part of my identity for a little bit. And so it was kind of embarrassing to just be like, no, I'm not going to do that anymore. And it shouldn't have been that way. People understand. And in my eyes, I thought that maybe I was a little bit of a failure, and I know that that wasn't true because I got into a program and could have gone and done it. I know that I could have done it, and it just, yeah, there were a lot of emotions and a lot of things that I had to kind of overcome. And I know that that is common for a lot of patients with chronic illness. And also, I don't want to, like, I never want to be to not take into account other people who live with chronic illnesses too, and the way that their disease has impacted their life. There are a lot of chronic illness patients whose diseases are so severe that they don't work. They can't work. The disease is that bad, and they've had to genuinely stop their overall career. And for me, I haven't had to do that. I have been able to work and do things and kind of adjust, but it did take away part of something that I wanted to do. But I'm not going to sit here and say that you can, or that everybody will be able to have a career, or that nobody has a disease that's so bad enough that they can't work, because I know that that's not true, and I know that I'm lucky to be able to, and but I don't want to downplay it at all, or also like oversell it either, because it's hard, and there are a lot of patients who truly cannot do certain things, like have a career, go to school, or all of that, and it's just the reality of living with chronic diseases, and it's tough, man. It is just it's tough, and I want people to understand that. Yes, there are plenty of patients out there who were able to get a PhD, that have a chronic illness and did their PhD or went to medical school, which is awesome, and I applaud them. And there are people like me who couldn't. My health took a different kind of turn, and then I was diagnosed with something else, and so many things kind of fell happened, and then certain things fell in place, and then some things didn't fall in place, and it just didn't work out in that regard. And then there are other patients who just can't can't do things like that, and it's such a spectrum of where people are and where they're at in their career and kind of what they've done. But I never ever want to say or try to show that just because I've gone through this and you've gone through it means that you can do the same thing, and the same, because I know that that's not true. So I always like to get that out there, and know that for people to know that you know my story is my story, and what I've been able to do is what I've been able to do, and what others are able to and not able to do is their story, and things that play out a very different way, and diseases that play out a very different way. So just wanted to talk about that. But when I finished my master's degree, I needed a job because I knew that I wasn't going that time. So what a lot of people know or don't know is I worked in health insurance for a little bit, and then went to a different side of kind of that world and employee benefits. Where I worked for a broker, and now I work for a hospital system, and I'm a data and analytics consultant, and that's my career currently. And I really like it, and it's been really good for me, and to kind of get to look at data and analyze data, and it kind of comes full circle, because that's what I if I got a PhD, obviously I'd be generating data and analyzing that data and all of that. So this is something that I think is a good fit for me. So with all of that said, career and chronic illness is tough. There are things that, as I've mentioned before, patients who have disease that's so severe and debilitating that they can't have the career that they want, and um, can't work. And then there are patients who, as I said before, are kind of in the middle of that, where, like me, like my disease is pretty severe, and I do have a lot that goes on to it, but I am able to work and contribute and to my team and all of that, and I feel very lucky. There are people who even have been able to kind of go above and beyond like that. There are people who are, again, people I know that have been physicians and PhDs and kind of continued on past. So it's such a spectrum of things, but it's something that we have to come to terms with. It doesn't really, if whether or not you maybe can or cannot work because of your chronic illness, you kind of have to come to terms with that. And there's a grief part of it. Whether you're like me and there are certain aspects of where you wanted to be in your career and the dreams that you had were not able to be fulfilled because of your disease, there's also kind of a grief and acceptance of that. And so it's very challenging to live with a chronic illness in general. It can be extremely challenging to live with a chronic illness and have a career and go to school and all of these things. But it's possible for some people to have chronic illness and be able to do all of that. So I've liked, as I said, it's such a spectrum of things where people fall in there. But I want people to know is that chronic illness affects us in so many ways. So career affects a lot of us in a very big way. School affects a ton of us and in a very big way. But it also affects our daily life. It affects our family life. It can affect our actual, or the job that we go to. It can affect our friendships and relationships and all of these things that chronic illness just digs in and can really put a dent in a lot of things, your career, your relationships, or your family. And I think for me, like being able to talk about it and to talk about what I've gone through and what I've experienced is helps me. I hope that it helps others. Just to know that you're not alone, whether you have a chronic illness and are not able to work, or you are in the middle and can work, but your disease genuinely impacts you every single day. Um, that there are people out there like me who or have been through some of that, who are rooting for you, and to know that you're definitely more than your chronic illness. And I hope that people see that and you see that, and that just because it has taken away something, that there hopefully is something else that you have gained from it. And that I hope that you and what I truly believe is that we are all where we are supposed to be. And I know that sounds kind of whatever, but I do believe that. I think that we end up where we're supposed to be in the path that we're supposed to be on. And it may not be what we thought that it would be or where we thought we would be, but it's where we need to be in that moment. So for those of you out there who have kind of gone through some of this, I'd love to hear your career tips and what you've gone through and how to navigate that. I will say that there are a lot of accommodations out there. There are laws and legal aspects of working with a chronic illness that we can talk about, at a later time. And that's what even schooling. There are things that can be put in place to help you navigate that and to be successful, to help you be successful in all of that. So again, thanks for listening. Thanks for letting me share my story. Thanks for telling me, not telling me. Thanks for letting me talk to you and to share this side of my life and what I've gone through and kind of how I coped with it. And I hope that it helps somebody. If you have any questions, please let me know. But thanks for watching.